Today we are going to read a classic story, Heidi, written by Johanna Spyri. Johanna Spyri was born in 1829 in the Swiss village of Herzl. Her house overlooked the mountains, and they inspired her to write the story of Heidi. Johanna Spyri moved to the city of Zurich after she married an attorney. Her yearning for her childhood home in the small village came out in the many children's stories she wrote. Although the author died in 1901, Heidi lives on as a story about the joy of life in the Swiss Alps. Chapter 1, The Journey Up the Mountain. The Swiss town of Mainfeld lies at the foot of a mountain range whose rugged peaks tower high above the valley below. Behind the town, a footpath winds gently up the mountain. One sunny June morning, a tall, strong woman was climbing up the path. She had a bundle in one hand and held a little girl about 5 years old by the other hand. The child's cheeks were flushed and sunburned, and she was wearing two dresses, one on top of the other. She looked like a shapeless bundle of clothing trudging uphill on a pair of shoes. After climbing for almost an hour, they reached a little village called Dorfli. This was where the woman used to live, and the people of the town remember her and called to her from their houses. She did not answer, but continued on her way until she reached a house at the very end of the main street. There, a voice from inside called to her. Half a minute, Detie, and I'll come with you if you're going any farther. Detie stood still, but the little girl sat down on the ground. Tired, Heidi? Detie asked her. No, but I'm very hot, the child answered. We'll be there soon. Just keep going and we'll be there in an hour. At that moment, a plump, pleasant faced woman came out of the house and joined them. The little girl got up and followed as the two grown ups went ahead, gossiping about people who lived in Dorfli or around it. The woman finally asked Ditti where she was going with Heidi. Ditti explained that when her sister died a few years ago, Heidi was all alone in the world. So, Ditti had taken her in and raised her. But now she had been offered a wonderful job in a good family. But the family lived in a city far away. Well, then, who will take care of poor Heidi now? Asked the woman. I'm taking her up to Uncle Alp, who lives on the mountain. It's high time he took some responsibility for her. After all, he is her grandfather. The woman looked shocked. Everyone knew that Uncle Alp was strange. He lived all alone on a mountain. He never talked to anyone in the village, and he hadn't set foot in church for years. He had a wild look in his eyes, and he wore a long white beard. No one really knew how he got the name Uncle Alp or why he had lived alone for so many years. But Ditti's friend felt sure that Ditti knew more about the old man than anyone else. After coaxing her friend for a little while, the woman got Ditti to tell her this story. Uncle Alp grew up in a fine house in a lovely village. He was the oldest son and had only one younger brother. Instead of living a quiet life in the village, Uncle Alp longed for the exciting life in the city. He traveled all over, got into bad company, and drank and gambled away all his property. His poor parents died of shame and grief when they heard of it. His brother was ruined too. He ran away somewhere and no one heard of him again. Uncle Alp disappeared too. He had nothing left but a bad name. He was finally discovered in the army in a country far away. Here you can see Uncle Alp's fine house. Then no one heard of him for 12 or 15 years. One day he reappeared in the village with a young son and asked some of his relatives to look after the boy. But everyone refused. No one wanted anything to do with him or the boy. He was so angry that he vowed he would never set foot in the village again. So he came to Dorfli and settled down there with the boy, whose name was Tobias. No one ever knew what had happened to his wife. Most people believed that she died. Anyway, he saved a little money and apprenticed his son to a carpenter. Everyone learned to like the boy, but no one trusted the old man. There were all sorts of rumors about him deserting the army to avoid some trouble he had gotten into. All the same, he was accepted as a member of the family. His grandmother and my grandmother were sisters, so we called him Uncle. And since we are related to almost everyone in Dorfli, the whole village soon called him Uncle too. Then, when he went to live on the mountain, it became Uncle Alp. Anyway, after Tobias learned his trade, he came home to Dorfli and married my sister. They settled down very happily together. But only 2 years later, he was killed by a falling beam while he was building a house. My poor sister went into such a shock that she fell ill with a fever and never walked again. She only lived for a few more weeks. Everyone said the tragedy was Uncle's punishment for his own mistakes. They told him to his face that he was to blame, and even the pastor told him to do penance to clear his conscience. That made him so angry that he refused to speak to anyone. He went up on the mountain to live and hasn't been down since. My mother and I took my sister's child, Heidi, to live with us. But now I must go away, and there is no one but Uncle Alp to take care of her. Detie's friend looked at her with disapproval. She even told Detie that she was surprised that Detie could hand Heidi over to the old man just like that. But Detie said that she had no choice and continued on her way up the mountain. End of chapter 1. Soon we'll be back with chapter 2, Peter the Goatherd. Until then, take care.